Come on, Twitch. Good afternoon, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here on the old 5x5 channel here for a Wednesday lineup here today on this 22nd day of September. Good to have you aboard. Thank you if you are tuning in from all of the various platforms that you can find us on, whether it be on Twitch, whether it be on YouTube, D Live, over on the old Foxhole app, or over on Trovo. Good to see you here this afternoon. Getting off to a little bit of a late start here. Tried to cut down on perhaps a 2-hour broadcast into one, at least for myself anyway. Sunny days coming up behind me here. And of course, we got 412 season pixels and have to round things out here. Soko obviously not with me here today, still taking a little bit of a breather behind the scenes. So that being said, let's get after what we got here in store this afternoon. And so that being said, let me get this guy brought up here. There we go. All right. So on the afternoon, we got a little bit to talk about in regards to what all is going on in news. It's absolutely nuts out there. And of course, if you look at what is playing out, just this week, the bombs net being dropped from Project Veritas in the last day or so with part one of whistleblowers. And perhaps we round out the week with what's going on in Maricopa County, that they're going to try and counter all of these to try and distract folks away from what really matters most. And here today, we get one teen killed, 2 wounded in Kentucky bus stop shooting, suspects still at large. Is there much to be made of this? Well, I don't know. If you look at it in the context of what was it down in, where was the shooting yesterday? I know there was one, I believe, on Monday in Russia. There was another one same day, I think, in either West Virginia or Virginia. I forget which. But nonetheless, doggone well, they will try and distract us by some level of false flag. So on guard. 3 teens were shot and 1 was killed while waiting for the school bus in Louisville, Kentucky early Wednesday. According to police, students were waiting on a corner in the Russell neighborhood, situated immediately west of downtown around 6:30 Eastern Time, when an unidentified assailant in a vehicle drove by and opened fire, according to the Louisville Metro Police Department. An aunt of the student who died, whose name hasn't been released because he is a minor, spoke to a local TV station. I mean, you all probably interview a lot of families who are like, I can't believe this happened. He didn't hurt nobody. He didn't do anything. They can be out and God knows what, but I'm telling you, my nephew wasn't. He didn't have that time on his hands, she said. A second student, a 14-year-old boy, was taken to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, while the third, a 14-year-old girl, was grazed, police said, but was treated at the scene. All 3 students were all enrolled at Eastern High School in the Jefferson County Public School District. The other 2 students have sustained serious injuries. There's a tweet out of LMPD, says alert confirmed that 3 juveniles were shot this morning at a bus stop at W.J. Hodge and Chestnut Streets. Hashtag LMPD on scene, and we'll update shortly. Police say they're gathering leads and launching what will be a well-funded investigation into finding the culprit. But right now, whoever did it remains at large. The shooting comes after a bomb threat incident required the evacuation of several schools in nearby Lexington. The threat came with a demand for a $500,000 payment in Bitcoin. Interesting. We've heard about cryptocurrencies being used for ransom as of late, and, the knights in shining armor, the FBI is magically turns up, solves the crime, yanks the mask off just like in a Scooby-Doo fix, and voila, here come the heroes at the FBI who have, by the way, just taken a major black eye in the case of the gymnasts as of late. It's time to disband them. Anyway, carrying on, also out of Zero Hedge here today. Interesting piece here. A contributor says House Dems strip funding for Israel's Iron Dome to keep government funded. And this on the heels of the $3.5 trillion package that they want to try and pass. Doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. Here by month's end, or into October rather, I believe that the debt ceiling must be raised, or else old Janet Yellen sitting over at the Treasury seat won't be able to make the payments on, just a small snippet of interest for all the trillions and liabilities and that we have. But Blue Apples says this: under pressure to approve a stopgap spending bill to avoid a government shutdown, one of the last hurdles to pass the legislation in the House was unexpectedly a matter of foreign and not domestic policy making. On Tuesday, a cadre of progressive Dems triumphed in their charge to remove $1 billion of taxpayer dollars in the bill that was earmarked to fund a replenishment of Israel's Iron Dome missile interception system. Removing the foreign aid from the spending bill was a tipping point, given that it narrowly passed by a vote of 220 to 211. Had Dem House leadership remained steadfast in keeping the provision included, they would have not only risked an imminent government shutdown, but also would have failed to extend the federal debt limit beyond the 2022 midterm elections. So yes, I believe here in recent days, the House put together their proposal, kind of a stopgap measure and that, and then I believe it was supposed to get sent over to the Senate. And in the meantime, McConnell and company put together their package, and they'll probably bounce it back and forth between the houses, reconcile it, and it'll last for about 4 months, and then we go through this malaise yet again. The initiative to have the earmarked foreign aid to Israel removed from the bill was led by Dem Representative from Minnesota's 4th Congressional District, Betty McCollum. Though McCollum has served in her capacity since 2001, the support she gained from less tenured progressive congressional representatives, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar, became the focal point of their initiative. With just 3 votes against a spending bill from the Dem majority needed to keep it from passing, the opposition from that small faction would have been enough to cause an impasse. With a domestic imperative to keep the federal government funded through the calendar year was the focus of negotiations over the resolution. This necessary concession to achieve that has already reverberated internationally. Upon learning of the removal of the funding, Israel Foreign Minister Yair Lapid immediately instigated an emergency phone call to House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. Any trepidation expressed by the foreign minister was quickly quelled as he was reassured that the funding would inevitably be given to Israel, most likely through its inclusion in the forthcoming 2022 Defense Appropriations Bill. Rosa DeLauro, Democrat representative for Connecticut's 3rd District, initially echoed Hoyer's sentiment, but would later advocate for a more proactive initiative to have the funding passed as a standalone bill. Regardless of how the $1 billion in aid to Israel is paid out, that apparently inevitably made Lapid change the tone of his initially fraught tenor, following those assurances as he thanked Hoyer for his friendship and unwavering support for Israel's security following their phone call. Though the exclusion of this foreign aid looks to have few ramifications on the U.S.-Israeli foreign relations, which are being reforged by the Biden administration in the infancy of the newly established government under Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, the occasion was enough to be a rallying cry for most members of Congress, regardless of their party affiliation. Fellow, though more moderate Dems, such as Rep. Elisa Slotkin, characterized the political maneuver against the foreign aid as devoid of substance. While no single Republican representative voted in favor of the short-term funding bill in which the aid was included, that didn't stop House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy from expressing his own especially vitriolic disdain, tweeting, "While Democrats capitulate to the anti-Semitic influence of their radical members, Republicans will always stand with Israel." So, in a nutshell, some shenanigans being played out by the folks on the Hill, as it were, and I would expect nothing less at this point, given that they care not about who they damage, what relations they damage, et cetera, and we'll go from there. All right, that being said, let's bounce over to a Breitbart article here regarding Biden here today. It says Biden pushes forward with plan to put 30% of land off limits, including private property. Interesting. Are you seeing the tenets of Agenda 2030 playing out in this whole Build Back Better BS from the World Economic Forum and the Klaus Schwab's, where you will own nothing and be happy about it? President Joe Biden is pushing forward on an executive order calling for 30% of U.S. land be conserved, up from the 13% that are national parks and other federal holdings, including private property. And while environmentalists want even more restrictions, Republicans and Americans whose livelihood depends on land are strongly opposed to what they see as a land grab by the federal government. The 30 by 30 goal has received a great deal of attention in farming and ranching communities across the country. American Farm Bureau Federation President Zippy Duvall wrote in April, America's agriculturalists are asking whether their good work will be recognized by the administration. They have voluntarily enrolled more than 140 million acres of private land into federal and non-federal conservation programs, a landmass larger than the size of New York and California combined. Now, mind you, this is on top of what has been playing out here throughout this year and maybe even part of last year, where the government, through the Ag Department, is trying to pay farmers to not plant anything. And of course, why would one want to do that, especially in times where we're seeing a rapid rise in inflation? Store shelves are pretty well bare. And on top of that, you got droves of container ships sitting off the coast of California who can't get in. Does that make a lot of sense? No, of course not. But this is what they do. Any discussion about conservation must begin with the recognition that farmers and ranchers are leaders in this space and have been for decades, Duvall wrote. More than 800 million acres of land are also being conserved under state and federal ownership, AG Daily reported. Multiple use federal lands, as well as actively managed and working lands, should be recognized for their conservation and open space benefits. The concern of farmers and ranchers are escalating regarding the intent of the 30 by 30 goal, the definition of conservation, and the metrics for defining success, among other things. Duvall wrote, we urge you to move swiftly to provide clarity about your intentions for the initiative. And when you do so, it will be important for you to invite public comment because farmers and ranchers are leaders in conservation and deserve to have their voices heard. But if not moving swiftly, the Biden administration is again focusing on the order. Taxpayer-funded National Public Radio reported on what it described as Biden's effort to slow the collapse of nature. Oh, yes. Particularly a good portion of Agenda 2030 is respecting nature, right? And we've seen that written in stone on the old Georgia Guidestones, right? After we get our population whittled down to just 500 million after this little pandemic, right? NPR interviewed Tom Goldtooth with the Indigenous Environmental Network. It's another scam to give the impression that these lands are going to be protected, set aside, restoring nature, Goldtooth said. But these lands are a greenwash for polluting industry. By allowing activities like logging or grazing or mining to still occur in limited fashion, Goldtooth says, nature is not being adequately protected. Not when the world's top scientists are warning that the clean air, water, and ecosystems that we all depend on are at imminent risk, NPR reported. Whip up the fear, NPR. Good job. NPR reported in a perfect world, there would be the ability to permanently preserve big chunks of land in the U.S. Way to toe the line. But Republican Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts spoke out against the plan when Biden put it in an executive order. We do need to watch any sort of federal legislation because the president doesn't have the constitutional authority to do this. He will have to work through the Congress, Ricketts said in a local television report. Ricketts also was rallying support for counties to fight this at the local level. 3 News reported. Every county board must approve a conservation easement, which is a contract between a landowner and the feds that would put the land into the conserved category. Ricketts said those contracts have strings attached and often are in perpetuity. We want people to be aware of what's probably going to be happening in your own backyards. So read the fine print and get your counties involved, Ricketts said. Well, that's very, very interesting, isn't it? And mind you, this on top of what we already know, right, with the likes of the land grabs net from, people like, Bill Gates and that buying up property and land all across America, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres. And for what purpose exactly? What purpose? And now you want to try and put farmers off the land, already trying to get the ag department to tell them to not plant stuff, while in the meantime we're sitting here watching our financial system blow up. Oh, you're not supposed to know that. I'm sorry. You're supposed to be distracted by COVIDs and lockdowns and masks and jabs and everything else that they try to feed you, right? I mean, that's ultimately what they want. They don't want you prepared. They want the government to be your safeguard. Seems we've heard about that from our forefathers in the past, have we not? Those who try to give up their liberty, those who trade liberty for a little temporary security will get a high degree of neither. There we go. Seems I recall that. Anyway, moving on, Tyrant Joe Biden says he will fight vaccine disinformation to increase vaccinations after Project Veritas expose. Hopefully many of you guys got the opportunity to check that out. A good 13-minute piece in that came out, part 1. Looking to see when part 2 comes out in regards to the protocols and that these hospitals have now dubbed, and as we found out, the Gates-Fauci protocol. Interesting. So now you get all these hospitals putting all these protocols together, denying folks of what they want, regardless of power of attorney or anything along those lines. And you get what the Gates-Fauci protocol prescribes. Remind me again what doctoral degree Gates has and how much time and surgeries and going and dealing with patients that Fauci did. Oh, that's right. It's a big fat goose egg, isn't it? But yet the smart people at the hospitals say, well, thou shalt follow our gods, Fauci and Gates. Joe Biden on Wednesday hosted a virtual COVID-19 summit when he announced the U.S. would be buying 500 million doses of Pfizer to donate to other countries. The United States is buying another 500 million doses of Pfizer to donate to low and middle income countries around the world. That brings our total commitment of donated jabs to over 1.1 billion vaccines, said Biden. Tyrant Joe Biden also said he will fight vaccine disinformation to increase vaccinations after a federal whistleblower who works in the HHS came forward to Project Veritas this week. And will fight vaccine disinfo and exercise transparency to build vital public trust in these life-saving tools, Biden said, struggling to read his teleprompter. Oh, yeah, fantastic. And in any case, here's the video of this nonsense. We'll let her play through.
And we're not going to solve this crisis with half measures or middle-of-the-road ambitions. We need to go big, and we need to do our part. Governments, the private sector, civil society, leaders, philanthropists. This is an all-hands-on-deck crisis. And the good news is we know how to beat this pandemic. Vaccines, public health measures, and collective action. During the first 8 months of my presidency, we have worked aggressively to get Americans and the world vaccinated. As President of the United States, my first responsibility is to protect the American people.
All right, that's enough of this blathering idiot. Obviously, he's delusional, can read a teleprompter, sometimes well, sometimes not, doesn't know where he's at. I'm not even sure he's technically at the White House for that matter. Protect Americans? No, you know better. You know you're just a sock puppet. At the end of the day, we know what protects us. We can do a better job than the government ever will. And your vaccines suck. You're just salesmen for Big Pharma. Operation, oh boy, it just slipped my mind. Anyway, carrying on. Biden's comments come just 2 days after Project Veritas released part 1 of their hashtag COVIDVaxExposed series. Jody O'Malley, a federal whistleblower who works for the Health and Human Services, went public with secret recordings revealing the truth about the COVID vaccines. The government doesn't want to know or want to show the COVID vaccine is full of shit, an ER doctor who works for the HHS said. They want to shove adverse effect reporting under the mat. A registered nurse was recorded saying she has seen a lot of vaccinated people get sick with side effects, but no one is writing the VAERS report because it takes a half an hour to write the damn thing. Wow. Half an hour. That's too much. I mean, dear God, best we can tell, VAERS probably only captures maybe 1%. So what are the real numbers behind the scenes? How many deaths? How many truly injured folks are we talking here? And I think the UK and that uses the yellow card system. Probably a similar deal, I would imagine. So it could be anywhere from 10 to who knows how much larger than the numbers that put forth in the VAERS system, right? Anyway, carrying on that theme, not capable of being commander-in-chief, GOP reps introduce articles of impeachment against Biden. This out of Daily Wire here today. And of course, we know this probably won't go anywhere regardless. And of course, we saw Marjorie Taylor Greene introduce that on day one of the pretendency of the Joe guy who's currently in the chair. I won't call him president because he's not. Rep. Bob Gibbs introduced 3 articles of impeachment against President Joe Biden. Their words, not mine, on Tuesday, citing his handling of Afghanistan, immigration, and the now defunct federal eviction moratorium. I take this seriously. I don't think it's haphazard. I'm not trying to get media attention for myself, Gibbs told the Washington Examiner, which first reported the impeachment push. He's done so much damage to this country in less than 9 months, which is really scary. He's not capable of being commander-in-chief, and that's obvious by the action since day one, when he took the presidency back in January, he said. Maybe something like this makes the White House think twice before they do some of this nonsense. No, they don't give a damn about a piece of paper. They've run ripshot over it. They disregard court rulings, things of that nature. You know, and even Ron Klain, their chief of staff, says, oh, we know that this stuff is against the Constitution, but we're going to do it anyway. Gibbs introduced the articles with Reps. Andy Biggs, Brian Babin, and Randy Weber joining as co-sponsors. Gibbs said that the congressman began work on the resolution before the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan erupted into chaos last month, focusing on Biden's handling of the border and the federal eviction moratorium. Within the past week, the border crisis has received renewed attention as thousands of illegal migrants flooded into the U.S. near the Texas town of Del Rio. Federal agents are holding thousands of migrants in a makeshift pen underneath an overpass with little supplies or shelter, risking a humanitarian crisis. 26 Republican governors co-signed a letter to the White House on Monday calling for Biden to crack down on illegal immigration and end the, quote, national security crisis created by 8 months of unenforced borders. The eviction moratorium was scrapped in August by the Supreme Court after the Biden administration expanded it in a move the White House had previously claimed was unconstitutional. At the time of the extension, Biden softened his language on the moratorium, claiming he can't tell whether it was constitutional. He said the extension would buy time for another solution to be found. Biden ordered the U.S. out of Afghanistan at the end of August, leaving potentially hundreds of Americans behind in the terrorist-controlled country. Biden also left potentially tens of thousands of Afghans who had worked with the U.S. military against the Taliban during the United States' 2-decade occupation of the country. 13 U.S. service members died in a terror attack during the chaotic and rushed withdrawal. In carrying out drone strikes against the ISIS-K terror group in response to the attack, the Biden administration bombed an Afghan aid worker, killing him and 9 members of his family, including 7 children. The Pentagon admitted the mistake last week. Gibbs acknowledged that the articles of impeachment are unlikely to go anywhere with Democrats in charge of the House. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't he just say at the beginning of the article he wasn't doing it for show? So if it's not for publicity's sake, and it's not going to go anywhere because of who controls the House, what is the point? Just to say that it was done? Spineless. Obviously, it's not going to go anywhere. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Gibbs told the Examiner. It shows that there are some Republicans that think that this president needs to be impeached. He needs to be removed from office one way or another. At some point, they're going to be held accountable for their actions, and this is kind of putting them on notice, he said. So again, if you recall that Marjorie Taylor Greene, I believe, on day one, by herself, put together her own article or articles of impeachment. And of course, we knew that wasn't going to go anywhere. I think she has since added to that. And I don't know if she is a party to this one or if this are some rhinos, what have you. But nonetheless, given the circumstances, it is all for show. It's not going to do a dang thing. In any case, moving along, still talking about COVID here, kind of along those lines, the misgivings of our government's ineptitude. Healthcare employees sue Louisiana hospitals over employer COVID vaccine mandates. This out of Just the News here today. And of course, I would imagine we're probably going to see a lot of this around the country as many employers think that they need to abide by what Biden said and try and push the jabs to all employers, 100 employees above, you name it. And so there's people that aren't going to go along with it. If you recall, there was a case, what was there, about 130 or something like that, nurses and whatnot that left Houston, I think it was, took the case up to the judge and basically got it thrown out because it was a leftist judge. So again, I don't know if we'll see anything out of this, but nonetheless, plaintiffs argue Louisiana citizens have a fundamental right to decide whether to obtain or reject medical treatment. My body, my choice, right? Or no? More than 80 healthcare workers are suing 2 Louisiana hospital chains over the health system's COVID-19 vaccine mandates for employees. Both lawsuits contain similar allegations and were filed by attorney Jimmy Faircloth in the 15th Judicial District Court in Lafayette. Faircloth once served as executive counsel to former Governor Bobby Jindal. The healthcare plaintiffs are seeking temporary and permanent injunctions against the vaccine mandates, as well as declaratory judgments against Ochsner Lafayette General Medical Center and Our Lady of Lourdes Regional Medical Center. Ochsner Lafayette General is South Louisiana's largest regional health system with more than 4,500 employees across the flagship Ochsner Lafayette General Medical Center and 6 separately owned or managed hospital affiliates. The Ochsner lawsuit asserts Louisiana citizens have a fundamental right to decide whether to obtain or reject medical treatment, as outlined in the state constitution, state law, and court rulings regarding informed consent and invasion of privacy. The lawsuit also cites scientific claims that COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent the transmission of the virus. There is no longer any serious argument that mandating vaccines will prevent transmission or eradicate the disease, as previously claimed, the court filing reads. Nevertheless, defendant is attempting to force plaintiffs and others to undergo vaccination for COVID-19 over their personal objections and in disregard of their uniquely well-informed understanding of the virus and treatment options. In the best possible light, these hospital mandates are a misguided effort to participate in a public health crusade by coercing private sector employees to undergo medical treatment for their own good and the good of the public at large. The legal complaint against Our Lady Lourdes Regional Medical Center mirrors the basic allegations against Ochsner, including disregard for natural immunity gained from previous COVID-19 infection. Our Lady Lourdes Regional Medical Center is part of the Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady Health System, one of the largest in Louisiana. The hospital chain adopted its system-wide vaccine mandate August 3rd. All employees, contractors, student clinicians, and volunteers require full vaccination by December 1st. Doctors, physician assistants, and nurses must provide proof of vaccination by October 31st or face suspension without pay. If not fully unvaccinated, Say that again here. Start that over. If not fully unvaccinated by November 30th, they will be fired according to the policy. If not fully unvaccinated, I would think that would mean if not fully vaccinated by November 30th. Maybe a misread on their part. In any case, the Lord's vaccination mandate allows medical and religious exemptions, but does not provide a clear deadline for submission, the lawsuit said. Rather, the instructions are at best vague and at worst intensely evasive to discourage use. In response, Lord's Regional Medical Center issued a statement saying it values all of its team members and respects their rights. No, they don't. If that were the case, they wouldn't be trying to push a quote unquote mandate, which isn't law, by the way, against their wish and will. So who's really pushing this behind the scenes? That's the question that needs to be asked. Our Lady of Lourdes maintains its vaccination policy, which we believe to be consistent with the law and appropriate to the circumstances, the statement said. It's not consistent with the law. There is no law. You can't hide behind something that doesn't exist. Just because you get somebody from on high, write a piece of paper down and make it say it's so, does not make it so. Osner Lafayette General's public response said, employees with medical and religious objections are able to file exemptions or deferral requests, which are individually and thoroughly reviewed by a panel of experts. Yeah, right. Again, make them fire you. Do not quit. Make them fire you. We continue to serve as a source of truth and provide ongoing resources, education, and vaccine opportunities to our employees and the community. So yet again, we're probably going to see a lot more stories of these, like these, in the coming months. We've already seen, down in Kentucky, I'm sure many of you guys have seen the gal who walked in, her badge didn't work, and they tried to escort her out and says, no, you got to give me a termination letter. And that's exactly what they knew, because they were culpable. And not only that, in doing so, they were forced at that point to make you go to the unemployment line, or you can go to the unemployment line. If anything else, you won't be able to. So they know that they've got these corporations by the cajones at the end of the day. The problem is all of these corporations are doing this because why? You think they paid off some folks, had some lobbyists sitting on K Street, try to, coerce some politicians to get their wishes and wills and whims and fancies pushed through Congress in the past? Time to pay the piper. And so, carrying on with that theme, we get this. U.S. authorities lying about effectiveness of Regeneron and ivermectin as treatment for CCP virus. This out of G News. I believe this was over on Bannon's War Room here recently. U.S. Representative Georgia's 14th Congressional District, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Joe Biden, the HHS, Don O'Connell have been lying about the effectiveness of Regeneron and ivermectin as an instrument for the CCP virus. They are also limiting the people's obtain these life-saving medicines. I'll let just a little bit of this play through here.
Here's what has me really hot with the HHS, and I'm angry because it's affecting people in Georgia, which is my home state. On the news right here, and I'm so furious about it, this was just last week, COVID-19 infusion sites closing across Georgia as states work through the new distribution process. Well, that's because Joe Biden's HHS took over and controlled the amount of Regeneron, the monoclonal.
Hold it, slow down. Tell me, what's the problem again?
So HHS is controlling the orders.
Yes.
For
now, mind you, this was reported last week, I believe it was, and we saw this through Florida, if I'm not mistaken. The monoclonal stuff. They've got all these shops, if you will, these medical centers set up to be able to provide that sort of treatment to folks, which again is not the jab that they ultimately want people to take, but it's effective. And they decide, we're going to just restrict the disbursement of that. We control to the states what goes out, not you. And I'm sure she's going to touch upon this where DeSantis says, nah, we'll just go around you.
Regeneron, the monoclonal antibody therapeutics. This is life-saving drugs. So here's the deal. Doctors swear an oath to save lives, right? That is what they're supposed to do. If there is a treatment for COVID-19 that can save lives, our government should be doing everything it possibly can to get that treatment to as many people as possible.
What body of evidence have you seen that makes you more open to the monoclonal antibodies versus the
gene therapies that are the vaccines? Yeah, that's a good question here. I've seen some reports myself. Here's some words out of MJT here, but obviously it's not the jab. It's all the monoclonal stuff does not do the things that these jabs do that, turn your DNA into mush. And basically you're just a piece of software that you can control over and over again and continue taking jabs the rest of your life. They own you, right?
The experimental gene therapies that are the vaccines?
Two people I know and love. Monoclonal antibody treatments. Regeneron saved President Trump's life from COVID. Saved President Trump's life from COVID. And I'll tell you the other person, my own husband. He got COVID not too long ago, was sick as can be, got Regeneron, got ivermectin too. They don't like that one either. He was taking ivermectin, got Regeneron.
Under physician's care?
And if that's the case, he must have been pretty lucky because they're now starting to crack down across the country. My guess is it's not going to be too long before you'll have a tough time trying to find it. So if by chance you need any of those sorts of treatments, you might want to try and seek those out now. Obviously, myself, I've got plenty of places where you can try and get those sort of prescriptions at America's Frontline Doctors and the like. I have more to say about that here a little bit later on.
Under physician's care within
informed consent, he made a decision.
Absolutely. In 24 hours, Steve, he was completely healed. Not sick anymore. No
How
fever.
Sick was he at first?
He was very sicker than I've ever seen him. I thought he was going in the hospital.
Sicker than you've ever seen him?
Yes. But here's the deal, and here I want to tell you her name.
Okay.
Dawn O'Connell, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response to the United States, HHS. Dawn O'Connell.
She's Dawn O'Connell is the Assistant Secretary.
Yep. So we'll find out more of that. I'll leave that there. Maybe you guys have caught that over on Bannon's War Room in recent days. But obviously, the war is going to continue. The jabs versus the non-jabs. They want to divide the country. Reading a story yesterday, even along these lines, that they're talking that the holidays are going to be war. Jab versus unjab. Folks not meeting with their families, things of that nature. And it's all for what? Anyway, continuing on. Along those lines, obviously, this is causing quite a bit of strife down under. Melbourne construction protests grow as Australians' patience wanes. And mind you, yesterday, I believe we saw some of the dust-ups and that between the protesters, various citizens of Australia versus the police forces and the like. And then on top of that, here today, they just had an earthquake as well. So anyway, Australian protesters confronting union leaders before beginning to throw objects. Protests in Melbourne, Australia, among working-class construction workers have exploded, with large crowds seen in the past few days. Rebel News recently went to Melbourne to cover one of these protests, posting a video on YouTube about the event. You know that there's no 70-year-old grandma here, a construction worker sarcastically said during a montage of different interview responses. The worker was likely referencing a 70-year-old woman who went viral after being pepper sprayed by Australian police while laying on the floor during a previous protest. 99% angry young men. Isn't that what they wanted? Angry young men? No ladies to push around here, said another man. I'm an angry young man, all right, joked a middle-aged worker. Have you got your authorized CFMEU media pass? Laughed one friend to another. CMFEU is an acronym short for Australia's Construction, Forestry, Mining, and Energy Union. Now I'll come back to this here. The Rebel News reporter asked some of the workers what made them finally snap and decided that enough was enough. We need to be mandatory 100% vaccinated to work as of next week, stated one man. Do politicians need to be vaccinated to go to work? About midway through the video, protesters can be seen throwing objects at representatives of the CFMEU building, with it stopping upon the arrival of armed police and riot gear. Brawls between union members and leaders broke out soon after. Unlike many previous Australian protests, police did not attempt to engage in mass arrests. Many Australian construction workers in the video were also seen saying they would never again vote for candidates from Australia's Labor Party. The Rebel Media report concluded with the journalist asking the viewers to help spread the news, with a loud cheering group of Australian workers behind him cheering the message on. So let's take a quick peek at this guy.
Now, one thing I've got to say is to the nation of Australia, as a union member, I'm so sorry that we didn't stand up for all those shopkeepers and all those other people that have been trampled upon. And I feel disgusted that we were allowed to work during that time. So I do apologise. But let's stand up as a nation. This is bullshit what's going on, and don't be tricked by the media, by the lies and the deceit.
So John Sector promised he'll be out within an hour. They gave him an hour and a half, and then the crowd, the members said their time is up and tried to storm the building. What does it mean, time is up?
Time is up, man. We've waited long enough. We want to hear what the go is. We're sick and tired of waiting. No more bullshit.
No, they're not.
All right. Well, we'll cut that there from the short intro. But I think we get the idea that obviously Australia definitely is ground zero, as it were, for their authoritarianism push. I think this is exactly what the World Economic Forum, the Davos, Klaus Schwab types want for every single country. And if we don't stop it here now in its tracks, that's exactly what we're going to have to look forward to. Doesn't matter if we're talking here in the United States, doesn't matter if we're talking in Canada, which just, by the way, had their elections with Trudeau, getting back in mysteriously, or the UK, it doesn't matter. So we're going to have to head this off, and quickly. All right. Well, that being said, moving into Gateway Pundit again, talking about what is coming up by the back end of the week here with voter suppression and voter issues and everything else, fraud, all of that stuff combined. Voter GA founder Favorito agrees that ballots missing chain of custody documentation are invalid and should not have been certified. Mind you, we knew that in the very early days, but yet Raffensperger went ahead with it anyway. Why? Because he's bought off by China. Plenty of pictures to support it. In Georgia on Monday, Attorney General Garland Favorito was in court ready to obtain ballots from the state to validate his group voter GA's concerns with the 2020 election. Instead, the judge punted the case down the road for another 20 days before he will make a decision. And that was the article from a couple days ago. Georgia Nightmare, judge in 2020 election case, hands investigation over to attorneys for corrupt Secretary of State Raffensperger, gives them 20 days. That's like saying, hey, Eric Holder, go investigate yourself about gun running. We're to see what you find. Chain of custody was one area of concern that Garland Favorito and others are concerned with. We also believe this is a major area of concern countrywide from the 2020 election. Ballots appeared from everywhere and were included in the certified election results. But tens of thousands of these same ballots were missing the legally required chain of custody results. And it's all about the chain of custody documentation. Georgia's 2020 election comes down to this previous article. This article above was raised in a discussion with voter GA founder Garland Favorito after Monday's ruling, and the participants in the discussion all agreed this issue is relevant. Here's a portion of the discussion found at CanCon. So I'll come back to that here. We need to demand all ballots in the 2020 election are valid and include the proper chain of custody documentation. If not, they should be excluded from the results of the election and never should have been certified. Take a listen in on this.
I want to bring this in, Garland, and get your opinion on this, because I thought Joe Hoft had a really good article this afternoon talking about the chain of custody. And this is one of the biggest discrepancies in Georgia that doesn't span Fulton or Gwinnett or DeKalb or Cobb or Coffee. It spans them all.
Yep.
It's not just individual counties. And he makes the argument in here that because these chain of custodies were breached in they were bastardized so abruptly and so obviously that there's no chance you can legitimize the ballots in these chains of custody that were broken. Most notably, or one of the most notably, most recently anyway, is the 43,000 in DeKalb that were basically taken between 13 to 22 hours from pickup to drop off to the county clerk's office.